My wife's phone screen lit up while I was holding my son in my arms. That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with lipstick on a collar or a motel receipt falling out of a jacket pocket. Just a screen glowing blue in the dim living room while Serena was upstairs in the shower, and 4 words that rearranged every certainty I'd built over 19 years of marriage. "How's our little man tonight?" The message came from Damon Whitfield, her boss, VP of Business Development, at a medical supply company with offices off Peachtree Road in Buckhead. I'd met him exactly twice, once at Serena's company holiday dinner at a rooftop restaurant downtown, and once at the hospital the morning after Caleb was born. He'd brought a gift basket and made some smooth comment about Caleb already looking like a negotiator. I'd thought, just another polished Atlanta corporate guy. The kind of man who says absolutely instead of yes, and treats every room he enters like a networking opportunity. Our little man. Not your baby, not little Caleb. Ours. I sat completely still. Caleb was asleep against my chest, his tiny fist curled around the collar of my shirt. The TV was on behind me, some crime documentary I wasn't watching. From upstairs I could hear the water rushing through the pipes and faintly, Serena humming. She'd started showering late after work every night about 6 weeks back. Said the hot water helped her decompress. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? I looked at the message again. Turned it over in my mind like a rock you pick up and can't explain why it bothers you. Maybe I was misreading it. Maybe Damon Whitfield was just one of those overly familiar boss types, the kind who asks about everybody's kids at company picnics and thinks it makes him personable. Maybe. Then a second message came through. Did he sleep any better last night? She mentioned he was still fighting his schedule. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. I set Caleb carefully into the crook of my arm and unlocked Serena's phone. The conversation thread opened to exactly nothing. A blank screen. Deleted. That hit me harder than the messages themselves. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about betrayal: innocent people do not erase conversations. Innocent people forget their phones exist. Innocent people leave half-typed texts and old receipts and embarrassing voice memos in their message history because they have no reason to clean house. The scrub screen felt like a confession wearing a straight face. Upstairs, the shower shut off. I put her phone back exactly where it had been, took 2 screenshots and sent them to myself, and stood up with Caleb still pressed against my chest. My hands were shaking badly enough that I nearly dropped the formula bottle I'd been warming before all of this happened. Funny thing about shock. Your body keeps performing ordinary functions while your mind starts sliding sideways off a cliff. I carried Caleb into the kitchen and finished making his bottle. Warm water, measured powder, shake, wrist test, muscle memory. I stood there feeding my 3-month-old son in the yellow kitchen light while the dishwasher ran its quiet cycle, and the refrigerator hummed and the old Atlanta house settled around me. And I thought, this is still my house. This is still my kitchen. Nothing has changed yet, except everything already had. Let me tell you who I am, because the kind of man you are matters in a story like this. I'm Marcus Webb, 50 years old. I own Webb Electrical Contractors out of Decatur, 3 service trucks, 8 guys when nobody calls in sick. We wire commercial buildings, strip malls, the occasional hospital renovation. It is not glamorous work. My hands show it. My back shows it. My right knee shows it on cold mornings in January, when the Georgia clay is frozen hard under job sites and the ladders are stiff. I spent my 20s working other people's crews, and my 30s building my own. By 50, I figured the hard part was mostly behind me. Serena was 40, smart, funny, the kind of beautiful that comes from confidence rather than effort. She could walk into a room in a plain dress and her old Spellman sweatshirt and outshine every woman there. We'd spent almost 6 years trying for a baby. 6 years of specialist appointments at Emory, of hormones and protocols and IVF cycles that cost more than I wanted to admit, of nights where Serena cried into my shoulder because she was convinced her body had betrayed her. I gave her injections myself when her hands shook too badly to hold the needle steady. I'd sat in more waiting rooms than I ever expected, reading dog-eared magazines and trying to look calm because she needed one of us to look calm. When Caleb was born 3 months earlier, I genuinely believed the worst was behind us. I was wrong. The kind of wrong that leaves a mark. I knew who Damon Whitfield was, beyond the gift basket. Regional VP, big Alpharetta house, slate gray BMW that cost more than my first truck, and probably my second one too. The kind of man who gets described as driven in professional contexts and intense in personal ones. I'd seen him twice. Both times, I'd noticed the way he spoke to Serena familiar, almost proprietary, the way men talk to women they've decided belong in their orbit. I'd noticed it, and I'd dismissed it, because I was not that husband. I was not the paranoid man who made his wife's professional relationships about him. I was regretting that now. I opened Facebook and searched for Renata Whitfield. The profile picture showed a woman in her late 40s standing beside a golden retriever near Lake Lanier, squinting pleasantly at the camera. She had one of those faces that belonged in a church directory, warm, organized, PTA president energy. I sat looking at her profile for a long time. Long enough that Caleb finished his bottle and went still and heavy on my arm with that deep baby sleep that feels absolute. I opened a message window. My fingers hovered. I could still close this. I could set the phone down and pretend the last 40 minutes hadn't happened. I could tell myself I misread the tone. I could give Serena an opportunity to explain. I could protect whatever version of our marriage still existed inside those familiar walls. Then I looked down at Caleb, and the word "our" came back to me like a sound in an empty room. I sent Renata the screenshots. Underneath them, I typed 6 words. You deserve to know the truth. Then I sat in the quiet kitchen holding my son and listening to Serena's blow-dryer running upstairs. And I waited. 28 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Serena called down from upstairs without coming down. "Baby, can you get that?" I walked to the front door slowly. Each step felt strange, like I was moving through someone else's house, inside someone else's life. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch in a dark jacket, jeans, white sneakers. She held an iPad in both hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara faintly tracked beneath them, and she was breathing in that controlled, deliberate way people breathe when they are working very hard not to fall apart. We stood there for a long second, looking at each other in the doorway. "I'm Renata Whitfield," she said quietly. "I think we've been told the same lies." Behind me upstairs, I heard Serena begin humming again. "Come in," I said. Renata stepped inside carefully, like she wasn't certain how much space she was allowed to take up inside another woman's home. I led her back toward the kitchen. From upstairs, dresser drawers opened and closed. Serena moving through our bedroom, completely unaware that the floor beneath her was already gone. Caleb started crying just as we reached the kitchen, that tired, disoriented baby cry that means wrong position or hungry again, or simply "I exist and I want you to acknowledge it." Renata looked down at him immediately, and for some reason that was the moment the whole night became real to me. Not the screenshots, not the deleted threads, the baby crying between 2 strangers in a kitchen while my wife hummed upstairs. "Can I warm that?" Renata asked softly, nodding at the bottle I was still carrying. I handed it to her without speaking. She warmed it while I bounced Caleb gently against my shoulder. Neither of us talked for almost a full minute. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's car alarm chirped once and went quiet. Then Renata said, "I almost didn't come. I kept rocking Caleb, but you did. Yeah. When somebody sends you proof your husband might be sleeping with her, you don't really sleep after that." The microwave beeped. She handed me the bottle, and our fingers brushed both cold. I sat at the kitchen table and fed Caleb while Renata set the iPad down beside my placemat. "I found more," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "How much more?" She gave a short, hollow laugh. "What you sent me was maybe 4% of it." I leaned back slowly in the chair. Renata unlocked the iPad and opened synced iCloud messages. Months of conversations, hotel confirmations, inside jokes, receipts. I felt my throat close as I scrolled. One message from Damon. "Tell my little linebacker I'm getting him Falcons season tickets." One from Serena back. "Only if Marcus doesn't put him to sleep talking about circuits first." I stared at that for a long time. I want to stop and be honest with you here, because if you've never had a moment like this when you see proof that your life has been happening in 2 parallel versions, and you only knew about one of them, it's hard to describe the specific way it feels. It's not like anger. It's not even quite like grief. It's closer to the sensation of reaching for something solid and finding air. Every memory you thought you owned suddenly has a question mark attached to it. There were hotel receipts in a separate folder. The Marriott Midtown, a Chicago boutique hotel, conference weekends, fake work trips. I cross-referenced dates automatically. the way a man does when his brain is trying to protect him by turning pain into arithmetic. One date matched a week. Serena told me she had mandatory compliance training. Another happened 9 days after Caleb was born. 9 days after Caleb was born. I closed my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. That was around the time Serena couldn't walk comfortably yet. I'd been doing 2 a.m. diaper changes alone. I'd been heating bottles in the dark. And this man had already found his way back into her phone, into her day, into our days. "You okay?" Renata asked carefully. "No," I said. "But I'm not going to put my fist through a wall if that's what you're worried about." That got the smallest possible smile out of her. First one all night. She rubbed her forehead with 2 fingers and looked suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. "I found out 3 months ago. Maybe suspected it longer." I looked up. "You knew 3 months ago and stayed?" The question came out harder than I intended. Renata didn't flinch. She looked around my kitchen slowly, the photos on the refrigerator, Caleb's stroller near the garage door, the breast pump Serena had left drying beside the dish rack. Then she said something that landed like a stone in still water. "After 31 years with someone, leaving isn't just leaving. You leave routines. You leave the version of yourself that existed inside that marriage. You thought you'd grow old with that person. You grieved the future while you were still standing in it." I looked down at Caleb, and I understood her exactly. She scrolled further. More messages, more patterns. One from Serena that stopped my blood cold. "Marcus still says Caleb looks just like him." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. Renata said, "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for telling me the truth." Upstairs, footsteps crossed the bedroom floor. My pulse spiked, but the mattress creaked faintly, and the house went quiet again. She'd gone to bed. "There's one more thing," Renata said. I almost laughed. Of course there was. She hesitated. "Damon moved about $8,000 from our investment account 2 months ago. I'm almost certain it was for her." I sat very still for a moment. And then every late meeting and every carefully explained conference rearranged itself inside my head into something I didn't want to look at directly. The fear arrived quietly. Not fear about Serena, fear about Caleb. Because once that thought enters your mind, our little man, you cannot put it back in the drawer where you found it. Renata watched my face. "You're wondering if he's yours." I didn't answer. For what it's worth. "I think Damon believes he might be the father. I think he told her that." That sentence hit me in the ribs like a closed fist. I stood up and walked to the sink and ran the cold water and stood there staring out into the dark Georgia backyard at my own reflection in the window. 50 years old, barefoot, standing in my own kitchen at midnight, wondering if my son had my blood. Renata spoke carefully from the table. "So what do you do now?" I stayed quiet for a long time, watching my reflection. Then I turned around. "There's a baby sleeping 10 feet away," I said. "And until I know the truth, I'm not burning anything down." Renata nodded like she'd made a similar calculation and understood every variable in it. She left around 1 in the morning. At the door, she paused like she was going to say something, then stopped. Because what do you say after a night like that? We'd arrived as strangers. We left as something harder to name. I locked the door and stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then I carried Caleb upstairs. Serena was asleep, one arm curled around my pillow. She looked peaceful in the way that only people carrying secrets can look that practice stillness. I stood there holding my son in the dark for a long time. 3 days later, a plain brown box arrived on the porch between a package of paper towels and a Costco delivery. Serena brought it inside without looking at the label. "More electrical parts?" she asked. "Something like that," I said, and I hated how easily the lie came out. If you have ever had to perform normalcy while your interior world is in full collapse, you understand the specific exhaustion of the next 10 days. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like a movie. It feels like being asked to run a full work shift with broken glass in your shoes. You keep moving because stopping means explaining why you've stopped. I showed up to job sites. I approved invoices. I had a full conversation about permit timelines on a hospital renovation project near Grady, while internally I was somewhere else entirely. I missed an appointment for the first time in 8 years. A client in Stone Mountain left me a worried voicemail. I blamed the baby, which was not entirely a lie. At night, Serena still reached for me sometimes in the dark. 19 years of marriage builds a physical grammar your body follows, even when your heart is standing still. Those moments nearly undid me. One night around 1:30, Caleb started crying. I went downstairs and warmed a bottle and sat in the recliner in the dark, and I fed my son in the silent house, and I cried. Not loudly, just quietly, steadily, with tears running down my face while this small, perfect, completely trusting human looked up at me, and I thought, if this child isn't mine, I don't know what I'm made of. That thought terrified me more than anything else, because it told me I already loved him without conditions. The morning Serena found me asleep in the recliner with Caleb on my chest. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her robe and looked at us with an expression I couldn't read. "You're a good dad, Marcus," she said softly. I nodded and asked her to hand me my coffee, and that pretending, just pretending, became the hardest thing I have ever done. One Thursday afternoon I came home early after a canceled service call. Serena was on the back patio speaking low and fast into her phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I stood just inside the sliding door and heard Damon's name and stopped breathing. "No, you listen to me," she was saying, voice sharp and urgent. "If Marcus finds out everything, we're both finished. I know what you promised. I cannot talk right now." She turned. Saw me. Panic crossed her face there and gone in a second. "Hey, you're home early." "Cancelled appointment," I said. "That was my sister," she said too quickly. I looked at her and nodded. And for the first time in 19 years, I knew with complete certainty that my wife was lying directly into my face. That knowledge landed quietly. No explosion, no confrontation. Just something inside me going very still, the way a structure goes still right before it fails. 3 days later, I drove south on I-20 inches my work van and ended up parked outside a Dairy Queen near the airport. Engine running. Heat on high because Atlanta November still gets cold enough to remind you it means it. My hands shook opening the envelope. I remember a pop country song playing on the radio. Fry smell from the exhaust fan on the building. A teenager in a red uniform carrying trash bags outside, glancing over at the running van. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I read it again, then I put my forehead against the steering wheel and sobbed. Not quietly this time. Fully, completely, for a long time, in a fast food parking lot off the interstate, in a van that smelled like wire insulation and old coffee. Caleb was mine. He was mine. The relief hit first, total oceanic relief, then the anger. Because Serena had done all of this, had taken all of this into her own hands, and had still let me spend 10 days wondering whether my son belonged to another man. She let me sit with that question. That is the thing about betrayal at 50. It's not just what they did. It's every moment they watched you suffer and chose silence anyway. I called Renata from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring. "He's mine," I said. She let out a long, shaky breath. "Thank God," she said. I laughed the bitter kind. "Yeah, thank God." Then she told me something else. Company auditors had quietly begun reviewing Damon's expense reports. Fake travel reimbursements, phantom conferences, hotels that matched no actual business travel. "He's getting sloppy," she said. "How sloppy?" She actually laughed. Yesterday, he sent a flirty voice message to his office fantasy football group by accident. Half the Buckhead sales team heard him call her baby. For the first time in weeks, something loosened in my chest. 1 week from Saturday, Renata texted me later that night. "Damon's receiving a leadership award at the Riley Fund Gala downtown, Omni Hotel at CNN Center. Auditors confirmed attendance." I almost didn't go twice. The first time was 3 days before, sitting in my office above the garage reviewing crew schedules. One of my guys was out sick. A truck needed brake work. Caleb had been up most of the night. Real life keeps piling up. I want you to understand that. Betrayal does not pause the rest of your responsibilities for dramatic effect. It piles on top of them. "Still coming Saturday?" Renata texted. I stared at the message for a long time. I don't know. And I truly didn't. Because you cannot unhear things. You cannot ask a room full of people to forget what they saw. That Saturday evening, Serena came downstairs around 6 in a deep burgundy dress I hadn't seen before, simple, elegant, her natural hair pinned back in a way that made her look like the woman I'd married at 31. For one dangerous second, she looked exactly like that woman. "You sure you don't want to come?" she asked, fastening an earring. "Spouses are invited." I kept wiping Caleb's hands with a burp cloth. "Somebody's got to stay with this little man." She smiled softly, then looked at me more carefully. You've been distant lately. I looked up. I'm tired, Serena. That's not all it is. She held my gaze for a moment. For half a second I wondered if she already knew that I knew, if somewhere beneath the performance we were both waiting for the other to break first. Then she kissed the top of Caleb's head. Then mine. Don't stay up too late, she said. The front door closed. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked down at Caleb, chewing a plastic giraffe. Something settled. I had Caleb over at Denise's place by 7:15, and I was on I-75 North heading toward downtown Atlanta by 7:30, through cold November rain. The Omni Ballroom was everything I expected and nothing I was ready for. Soft jazz, shrimp cocktail, people in formal wear holding champagne like props in an advertisement for something unaffordable. I found Renata near the registration table. She looked calmer than the night she'd stood on my porch. Still tired around the eyes. "You came," she said. "Yeah. You okay?" "Nope." Small smile. Second one. And then I saw them across the room. Serena beside Damon, laughing at something a sales director had said. Comfortable. Easy. Her posture relaxed in the way it only is when you feel genuinely at home somewhere. That hit harder than anything I'd read on an iPad. Renata watched me. "You don't have to do this tonight." I watched Damon's hand drift to the small of Serena's back and rest there like he owned the address. I thought about a van in a Dairy Queen parking lot, and a man crying against a steering wheel at 49 with an envelope in his hands. "Yes, I do," I said. Around 8:30, Damon saw us. The corporate composure flickered a half-second crack, perfectly sealed, and he excused himself and walked over holding a whiskey glass. "Marcus," he said carefully, "didn't realize you were coming." "Last-minute decision," I said. Serena had gone pale. Linda folded her arms. Damon's eyes moved between us quickly. "Smart man. Quick calculation. What exactly is this?" he asked quietly. "A conversation," I said. He suggested somewhere private. Of course he did. In the side hallway near the elevators, the second the ballroom noise dropped behind us, his entire register changed. "Look, whatever Emily, whatever Serena told you." "She didn't tell me anything," I said. That stopped him. I watched him recalibrate. Then he said the sentence that ended any possibility I'd ever feel sorry for him. "Name your number." I blinked slowly. "Excuse me?" "Ugly situations help no one," he said. Voice low, smooth, absolutely certain this was a language I spoke. "Let's find something that works for everyone." I stared at him. Not because the offer surprised me, because the offer revealed exactly who he was. He'd looked at me at this situation, at my marriage, at my son, and seen a transaction to manage. He reached into his coat pocket for his phone, already moving to the next step. I reached into mine and pressed record. He kept talking. Smoother now, more specific. Numbers, clean separation, everybody's reputation intact. I nodded slowly like I was considering it, while the phone captured every word. Then footsteps rounded the corner. 2 people in conference lanyards. A man, a woman, moving with the specific, purposeful energy of people who have an agenda and a schedule. "Mr. Whitfield?" the man said pleasantly. "We were hoping to find a few minutes to discuss some reimbursement inconsistencies before end of quarter." Nobody in that hallway moved for 3 full seconds. Then Renata walked forward and handed them a sealed envelope. No announcement, no speech. Just a calm, deliberate handoff that somehow felt more devastating than any confrontation I could have scripted. The auditor opened it slightly. Hotel receipts. Printed messages. Wire transfer records. I watched the exact moment the calculation behind Damon Whitfield's eyes shifted from management to survival. Serena had drifted toward the hallway entrance. She stood watching with her arms wrapped around her own body, eyes moving between Damon and me, trying to understand the geometry of the room. Then Damon made his final mistake. "This is completely out of proportion," he snapped, and gestured dismissively toward Serena, without even looking at her. "She's replaceable. None of this is worth this level of exposure." The hallway went dead silent. Serena looked like she'd been struck. I slipped my phone from my coat pocket and pressed play. Damon's own voice filled the space between us, quiet and unmistakable. "Ugly situations help no one. Name your number." The auditors exchanged a glance. The male auditor said, very quietly, "Mr. Whitfield, we'll need a formal meeting Monday morning." Damon started to respond. The female auditor looked at him over her folder. "You created the situation, sir. That shut him up completely. A hotel security manager appeared 2 minutes later after a corporate representative quietly made a call. No scene, no raised voices, just professional, controlled, devastating efficiency. Damon walked out of the hallway flanked by 2 hotel staff members, while the jazz piano player at the far end of the ballroom continued playing without missing a note. Because that's what life actually does. It keeps going while yours stops. Renata exhaled slowly beside me. I thought this would feel better, she admitted. Yeah, I said. Me too. I found Serena near the elevator bank. We rode down in silence, just the two of us, with the kind of elevator music that somehow makes grief feel even lonelier. Outside, cold Atlanta night hit us. She wrapped her arms around herself on the sidewalk. I never wanted this, she whispered. Really, I said. Not angry anymore, just tired. She cried. She told me it had started during the IVF years, that I'd pulled away, that he'd listened, that she hadn't meant for it to become what it became. I listened to all of it. Then I said, I stood next to you through every single treatment, every shot, every night you cried because you thought your body had failed you. She nodded, tears running. And I became the last person in my own marriage to know what was happening inside it. She covered her mouth. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd spent 19 years beside, who I had loved genuinely, completely, without reserve. Love without loyalty becomes something else eventually, I said quietly, and I think we both know what it became. She cried harder, but she didn't argue. I think we need to separate, I said. She closed her eyes and nodded. A year later, the house in Decatur sounds different.